Man, that's the last time I take the portal shortcut to Boob World. Oh hey there, Wolfpack, didn't see you come in. Catastrophe here, and when I'm not spying on my brother getting laid in the boneyard, I'm reviewing hit horror classics with complex arcs, while surviving my own complex arcs. Speaking of which, I've recently grown a newfound love for the cult legend Phantasm, and even enjoyed some of its outrageous sequels. For those unfamiliar, the Phantasm Saga is often regarded as an amazing horror fantasy series, so uniquely designed, full of creative imagination, and its own distinct style of abstract terror, that it stands out as one of the most fun horror sagas ever. It never once feels like this series is unoriginal or copying the success of other classics, as the Phantasm series is so cool, unique, and totally bizarre. The series follows a trio of best friends: Mike, the young certified detective, Jody, his snarky older brother, and Reggie, the badass ice cream man, uncovering a grim mystery and attempting to defeat a wicked demonic monster in human form: the Tall Man.
You play a good game, boy, but the game is finished. Now you die.
Posing as an old mortician, the enigmatic Tall Man is soon revealed to actually be a divine alien overlord who's grave robbing our planet's corpses to reanimate into Jawas. And once he grows his armada to massive size, he intends to take over the world.
Eventually.
Now, you'd think that basic description is simple enough to follow, eh? But guess what? The Phantasm series is an entire realm of mind screws, grand scope grandiose, and practically anime arcs we follow for a mere handful of films. Created by Coscarelli, what initially began as a fun, over-the-top art house horror movie he shot with a limited budget and his buddies, spiraled into this beloved terror epic, which gained a cult following and insanely high stakes, solidifying it as a masterclass nightmare, worthy of the horror history books. Won't lie, this saga is weird. Weirder than most other horror tales, but it earned its status as a decent fear franchise since there's some marvelous stuff to awe. The Tall Man is an underrated icon who belongs right up there next to Freddy and the Candyman. He's played by Angus Scrimm, who my Nightmare Room lovers should recognize as the Fate Master from Locker 13.
You know what you must do.
Yepers, this was the horror series which made him famous in the first place, and made me appreciate the star a whole lot more, since he's easily the best highlight of all these films. Yet the heroes also have some riveting entertainment value themselves, so much that it lasted for 5 films. However, critics and even hardcore fans are divided on the sequels, which followed up on a grand first movie, so it's hard to say where exactly the series went wrong. I enjoyed granting this series a try and regret nothing, but I eventually understood why some adore and despise this saga, as it has both absolutely fantastic achievements and some sour disappointments, which feel like a slow death. What were the good titles among this obscure franchise worthy of your lifetime? And what are the tragic mistakes which should remain buried? Well, grab your tuning forks and 4-barreled shotguns, cause we're entering this tomb to see. Now, my usual audience is probably asking, Cat, are you really going to analyze an entire obscure sci-fi saga just because it featured an R.L. Stine villain? Yes, this is my ranking of the Phantasm Saga.
Boy.
award for worst Phantasm title goes to...
Oh, it really is an amazing story.
Epic, actually.
Yeah. I'm very sad to say that the lamest entry for me, and even the loyal fanbase, is the fifth fail. Phantasm Ravager is the definition of a letdown. After the saga went into hiatus for nearly a mere 20 years, Ravager was at last made once a ton of rewrites were done and hoops were jumped through. But tragically, this managed to be a conclusion as lame as the Lost and Game of Thrones finales.
What?
Phantasm Ravager was intended to be the last hurrah, where the heroes, after years of battling the Tall Man, would at last obtain the answers behind the monster, and defeat his conquest of our world, satisfying fans who stuck by the series thick and thin, with the details we long awaited. And what did we get?
Nothing!
This is a finale which flat out refused to close the book on this series, never grants us any answers, raises even more questions that are never going to be answered, and leaves everything open-ended for more sequels, which we'll never get to. After Phantasm 4, Reggie promises a dying Mike that he'll avenge him by ending the Tall Man once and for all, jumping the portal, following the Dark Lord back to his world to settle the score. However, this plot decides to give us a totally different story entirely. In Ravager, we follow Reggie and what he's been up to, where the movie hints that the whole saga was all just Reggie's dreams, since the ice cream guy is now a crazy old man who simply imagined his war with the Tall Man, and all his adventures have just been his dementia in old age. However, the movie's back to being a mind screw plot as we jump between old man Reggie wondering what's going on in a retirement home, and his badass self in the Phantasm world, continuing his fight against the monsters. The film really wants to make you question what's going on, but I won't even lie, this aspect totally hurts the film, since it got harder to follow or even understand what was going on. The mind game gimmick is super confusing and sucks you out because it loses you completely. This is the only flick which the creator had no control over, and it shows. The film quality looks atrocious. This looks like a frickin' Asylum mockbuster. How does the 70s B-movie look more high grade than the 2010s flick? The CGI is hilariously bad. Nothing in this movie looks real. Even the practical effects look terrible. The shots are straight up like a student film. The acting's so over the top or corny. The plot's a mess, it painfully tries to funny but bombs at it, and it feels like a ton of unused material and shorts were hastily crammed together to make this a feature film. You can tell production was sinking because this one never feels like a Phantasm tale. What makes it even more tragic is that this movie's also the final performance of Angus Scrimm's Tall Man. According to interviews, Angus was dying of old age by this point, so there's a lot of short interactions with him, and they CGI him into scenes frequently. Not trying to turn into a pansy snowflake on you guys, but this being Scrimm's last gig makes it harder to watch, knowing this would be his last time in the suit, and some scenes add a layer of sadness knowing he's gone.
Name's Jebediah. Been here such a long time.
This does bring me to another huge issue. Because Angus Scrimm was fading away from us, the Tall Man has a super minimal presence in this movie, despite supposedly being the grand face-off we've been waiting for. I would forgive CGIing him into this if the CGI wasn't so fake. These ideas of the Tall Man clone army and the megaspheres desolating the Earth are so cool, but the Sci-Fi Channel effects just kill it completely. Badass Reggie meets up with the Resistance, led by a fully grown-up Mike, who gets his bro back in the saddle, but the film keeps up the mind screws for far too long as we splice between the retirement home and the war zone all throughout, to the point it outstays its welcome. Not to mention, we're now on movie 5. It's the final battle, and we're still pulling this "is it all a dream or not" crap when the Tall Man made it loud and clear that all of this saga is real.
It's a dream.
It's only a dream.
No, it's not.
I wish we got Reggie duking it out with the Overlord over this story, because Reggie being stuck in the Matrix is not a satisfying plot. The story as a whole is all over the place, as we see Reggie hitting on another hot chick, dodging kill spheres, his wacky hijinks, the Resistance survival, long exposition dumps, returning old characters who do nada, bad CGI action scenes that fail to amaze, and worst of all, not pulling the dang trigger to finish the story on a high note. Shockingly, they actually have a post-credits scene gearing up towards the real finale, when this was supposed to be it, and is never going to succeed now due to Angus Scrimm's loss.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Now, unlike a ton of bad entries I have on these rankings, there was at least some good. I actually like Chunk, the badass dwarf soldier, since he's kinda funny. It's great to see the guys after all this time back together and reminded why they're true companions. Angus Scrimm is still giving his all even when at death's door. I legit think the post-apocalyptic world is a great direction, and Reggie remains the best character in this adventure, as he gets some of his most badass moments here.
Why? Why are you so obsessed with these two friends?
You can never understand. It's called loyalty.
Nevertheless, I don't recommend this movie at all because it's just disappointing. This was the point where even hardcore fans noticed the series was out of steam, and got a lame filler arc of unused ideas when they wanted the ending. Ravager is the tragic whimper that haunts this franchise.
But it still feels good to be back home. If this even is home.
Boy.
The sci-fi horror thriller with balls. Phantasm 4.
Up next from the bottom up is Phantasm 4, Oblivion. I have mixed feelings about this one. While it's vastly superior over Ravager, it's far from great. This is easily the most boring tale of the series. Ravager was at least short, but 4 is so slow, drags on forever, and is the bleakest depressant in a franchise about death. So many scenes go on for way too long, a lot of it could have been trimmed down, and worst of all, this movie relies heavily on deleted scenes and archive footage from the first classic.
I hate clip shows!
Yeah, no joke, this movie has such little substance that the director had to dig up deleted scenes which were originally meant for the original beloved masterpiece, but added into the sequel to flesh out the runtime. If you don't know, Phantasm 1 actually acquired over 3 hours of footage, which the director was forced to cut out for a more reasonable length.
3
hours!
These deleted scenes involved a ton of cute character moments, neighborhood hijinks, and even alternate encounters with the tall man. Alas, seeing all these deleted scenes only made me understand why they were deleted, because many of them are pointless or baffling. There's a legit dumb alternate ending where the bros defeat the tall man by hanging him on a tree, and literally a few minutes later, Mike stupidly releases him.
I won't hurt you.
You're killing the world!
I'll go away, and I won't ever come back.
You will?
Yes.
Thanks for dooming us all, you dolt! How does any of this factor into the fourth movie? It doesn't! The real plot of Oblivion continues on Mike's long-awaited confrontation with the Tall Man in Death Valley.
Ooh, scary.
However, Jody's ghost contacts a tired Reggie and warns him that his kid bro needs him one last time, where the Ice Cream Man goes on a wacky road trip to save him, encountering monsters and minions trying to foil him. We also get Mike mastering his powers, yet it's lambasting Star Wars and boringly dull. I can only describe this movie as the build-up towards the storm. We get some answers and huge story points in this to get us excited for the ultimate face-off. Sadly, this film is now officially worse because it's gearing us up for Ravager. And the slow pacing and lack of progress only shoots this bird out of existence. This was where it became clear that the director was stalling for time and relying heavily on Reggie and Mike's awesomeness carrying the story, as it feels more like a character study over the middle chapter. Now, it does have a lot more positives than Ravager, which is why I'm slightly merciful towards it. This fable truly does feel like it returns to the original's roots, as it's the last one that's an actual horror story. There's some creepy atmosphere and dazzling visuals in this. This is epic cinematography and effects, which look on par with big blockbusters. Oblivion has stunning imagery and intense dread. The Tall Man is all over the scenery.
Where do you think you're going, boy? Death is no escape from me.
We sorta get the origin behind our big bad, and Angus Scrimm gets to show off his acting chops in ways unseen before. The Tall Man is revealed to be a brilliant steampunk scientist who was studying interdimensional travel and how to be immortal. Don't those subjects always go hand in hand? However, we never get the full story, since once the Doc enters his portal, he comes out different. And much like Ravager, the writers dance around the audience's theories and refuse to give us too much, which does harm it. But I won't deny it's kind of interesting to see how different Angus Scrimm is as the normal Jebediah Morningside, since it makes his fate all the more tragic.
Have we met? I don't believe so. Wouldn't you like to sit down? Let me offer you some lemonade.
It's so cool seeing how the Tall Man wasn't always evil, yet fruitless. Since we still get little answered, Mike never learns too much on stopping him, and the rest of the film never gets as great as that. Mike and Reggie both wander the desert for minutes on end, and the Tall Man or his goons act creepy from time to time, but that's it until the climax. I honestly don't remember too much about this entry, other than the weird scares and sci-fi elements. I love Reggie, since at this point he's a total badass used to all this crap now, so his side of the story is at least fun. Yet Mike's arc is all a blur. He's apparently a good alien destined to defeat the Tall Man, but it's never developed. This movie tries to be the darkest one of the series, so there's tons of grittiness. Maybe a tad too much, since it doesn't feel as fun as previous entries. It wants us to take things serial again, but it's almost too bleak and grim to love. Mike actually dies at the end of this. But not really, because he's totally alive and well in time for the finale.
I can't do this anymore, it's too confusing!
Out of all the tales in this franchise, I am the least interested in rewatching this one, because it's simply forgettable, slow, drowsy, and not very fun.
It's so boring!
It's not as awful as Ravager from a film standpoint, but it's not going to leave much of an impression either. Oblivion's issue is that it feels less like a movie and more so an episode of a show. It's a complete middle chapter bridging us from the last epic moment towards the mega battle. But when your gears aren't energetic, then neither is your story. What more can I say? The movie's so lame it costed the creator full control over his own franchise.
Boy!
You're already dead. Phantasm 3.
Finally made it to the fan favorite gems. Alas, this is the one which is easily the most divisive sequel of the collection. You'll either really love this one or absolutely hate it. Fortunately, I sincerely enjoyed it a lot, and would dare say this is the last decent Phantasm flick before we crossed into Hellworld. Phantasm 3 is often hated because this picture dove headfirst right into horror comedy, and the series practically becomes a shonen anime now, since it gets insanely bizarre, for better and worse. Phantasm 3 essentially tries to copy the style of Evil Dead 2 and Jason Lives, having a lot more humor, zany antics, goofy ideas, and over-the-top acting, but also tries to keep up the serious horror arc occurring simultaneously. Personally, I really enjoyed it. It feels like the saga knew this was silly and odd, yet unapologetically embraces it without fear. I love how it feels like a Sam Raimi project. In part 3, Mike is abducted by the Tall Man for like the upteenth time, so we follow Reggie and his ragtag band of misfits going on a crazy road trip to save the boy and stop the Tall Man's evil plan this week. And that's basically the whole story, but there's some cool arc progression and key scenes moving the franchise forward for once to prevent any boredom. From this story on, Reggie officially becomes the central hero of the entire saga, as he gets more screen time and badass flair than our kid hero, now teen hero, Mike. And wow, does Reggie Bannister have the time of his life in this role, because this is where he really morphs into the Tall Man's greatest nemesis, and rises in the same league as Ash Williams. Reggie's actor was always the best highlight, but the sequels know how to have fun with him, and he's a joy to watch. His actor fully becomes his own icon, and he knocks every scene out of the park. Reggie recruits 2 new survivors in his quest, and they at least add some fresh air to the team dynamic. We meet a Home Alone kid techie named Tim, who's quite fun, and radical action girl Rocky, who's as hot as she is kick-ass. I love them, as they share good chemistry with Reg, and nice moments to shine in the battle. But of course, the Tall Man is kept as the dark side level menace as always, and Angus Scrim kills all comedic vibes once he pops up. This chapter finally reveals the extent of the Tall Man's power, that he has actually died in every movie he's been in, but can respawn thanks to his infinity lives. We learn the secrets of the Sentinel Spheres, and this plot reveals why he's obsessed with young Mike. It turns out that the Tall Man isn't simply trying to kill the boy, but Mike is actually an alien chosen one who has Tall Man powers within him, which can foil the Conqueror's scheme once and for all. But the Tall Man wishes to prevent that from happening before the boy evolves. And just to raise the stakes further, Jody, Mike's dead brother, comes back to life as a good Sentinel Sphere, guiding our heroes towards their destiny, and showing his kid bro the ways of the Force and whatnot. Holy smokes, that sounds awesome! How is this not the best movie of the series? As much as I love this story, it does have problems.
You bastards!
The comedy and weird-ass hijinks are super bizarre, almost to the point of sucking you out of the immersion. I mean, look at this stuff. The movie's so wild that it makes you ask, how the hell did we get here?
You're in trouble. You're in trouble.
As much as I love Reggie, even he gets too close to being an Ash Williams wannabe, like when he hilariously strikes out with Rocky since he wants him some chocolate, only to get cold ices, and his interactions with wacky comedy zombies being so out there. Oh, yeah, that's right, wacky comedy zombies. Admittedly, this fable's tone is all over the place. Sometimes we get dead serious drama, silly road trip skits, abstract sci-fi concepts, and Evil Dead comedy, which sometimes clash since it comes at you way too randomly.
Where the hell are we? I don't know, man. Somewhere in your mind.
However, I do love how freaky this movie is, since it showed me that the best element of the Phantasm sequels is how unique and different they are, compared to conventional horror stories. I genuinely love an absurd adventure over the boring calm before the storm of 4. Angus Scrimm just dominates all his scenes, and this is where he grows from an unholy boogeyman into a full-on malicious god who's grown tired of the game, now wanting to grab his victory, but keeping up his charisma.
Let me out of here! You know the way out.
The only huge negative I have against this sequel is the ending.
Well, here we go again, partner.
If Ravager didn't exist, then I would honestly argue that this movie has the worst conclusion of the series. After killing the Tall Man, totally forever this time, the movie awkwardly sets up plot threads in the most forced way possible. Rocky just decides she's done and ready to leave, with hints that she may be back one day. The film leaves many doors open. The Tall Man says,
"It's never over."
And one of the worst scenes is Mike randomly exiling himself to master his superpowers without ever saying goodbye to Reggie and walking off with zero explanation whatsoever.
Seeing is easy. Understanding, well, takes a little more time.
I'd hate you even if that made sense.
This ending sucks, and finally exposed the ugly weaknesses of this franchise too. Its inability to form a solid story structure, sequel bait overdose, awkward timing, and abruptly closing out on things just when they got interesting. It's why this flick's more of a wild popcorn thriller, rather than a top-tier mastercraft. Luckily, I can also say that there's more good than bad in this sequel, even if the fanbase disagrees. I love the Chrome Spheres gaining more danger and lore. The Tall Man steals the show, Reggie grows as a vital part of this saga, the characters in this nightmare are endearing, and this feels like a real escalating middle chapter. Say what you will about this dark comedy, and believe me, there's way more, but this sequel tried new things and wanted to be fun, which for me, it succeeds. Phantasm 3 is a decent thrill ride, which shows off the great potential this series had, as it's the last one which stayed stuck in your mind.
It's never over.
boy.
Alright, time to piss everyone off. Next on my ranking is Phantasm 1.
Kill him.
I know. Cat, what blasphemy is this? Phantasm 1 is the critically acclaimed horror masterpiece which billions of fans and critics alike adore for being a revolutionary work of art, and was so beloved that it made the best movies ever made list. However, I don't think it's perfect, nor a timeless gem at all, and honestly, I thought it was overrated.
That is not true!
Don't get me wrong, Phantasm is not unwatchable or awful, as it is good overall. The original Phantasm is a solid standalone horror tale, but it's one that appeals to a very niche audience, as the story structure follows a stream of consciousness, almost dreamlike style, full of never-ending mind screws and wicked imagery, straight out of a child's nightmare. Sadly, this movie's difficult to sell to newer viewers like myself, because it's very hard to follow, doesn't make any sense, has so much weirdness, and hooey, is it rough. A lot of the movie's effects have not held up well, and the film has such a slow pace that it can get too dull frequently. This was a low-budget 70s horror story, and it absolutely feels like one. It's so trippy that I legit did not worship it the first time I ever saw it, and I think it's overhyped. However, the fact that it's still this high up, you can tell it's not irredeemable. The creator Don Coscarelli allegedly based this story on nightmares he had as a child, and his own personal fears of death. And to be fair, that does show. Phantasm 1 feels like an R-rated Goosebumps tale, as we follow a child's perspective when he stumbles upon a mystery behind his small town's funeral home, while also dealing with some personal drama, such as the deaths of his parents and a fear of losing his big bro Jody once their lives drift apart. The film is carried by an ever-shifting mood of depressing bleakness, wholesome character interactions, slice-of-life antics, and unholy dread. It often dips into familiar horror cliches, but it gets a free pass, since like Elm Street and The Twilight Zone, this flick practically invented all these cliches, which is why it's thought of so highly. Although I see some lousy effects, there's an equal amount of many which still look terrific to this very day. Some scares are so epic that I fully understand why they're still creepy. Believe it or not, Phantasm 1 inspired many future horror fables thanks to its abstract scariness and unforgettable cinematic visuals. Horror tales such as Wes Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street, One Dark Night, Supernatural, and even Star Wars took inspiration from this. Heck, the Tall Man is arguably the precursor of the infamous Slender Man, both being ambiguous humanoid ghouls of large size dressed in snazzy suits who abduct innocent people. Speaking of which, the Tall Man is without a doubt the best part of the flick, and Angus Scrimm carries his charisma from movie 1 all the way to the end. The Tall Man is at his scariest in this title, being treated as this ominous boogeyman with an uncomfortable otherworldly feel, who terrorizes the heroes in many grim ways. Basically, movie 1 reveals his whole scheme during Mike's childhood sleuthing. The tall man is a monster in human disguise, from another dimension, who's killing people and grave robbing Earth corpses so he can mutate them into Jawa minions back in his homeworld, in order to build his army, where he will eventually take over the world.
Of course!
Now, that truly does make for a great idea, but since it's not top dog, you know I do have issues. This movie is so random, and the alien twist is not built up at all. They just drop it on you after literally nothing but subtle scary atmosphere and ominous writing. It never really stops to breathe once we learn the truth, but what holds it back from perfection for me is how cheesy these effects are, and how uneven the pace gets as it goes on. The fly puppet and Jawas are so incredibly fake looking that they made me laugh more than fear them. This was originally an indie movie, so a lot of the cheapness does stick out like a chrome dome, and some of the acting in places is equally as dopey. But the directing has both ups and downs for me, as it does get so slow and aimless, with many scenes not making any sense at all or just plain confusing. However, it does atone for that with some unnerving nightmare fuel, feels like a bad dream brought to life, and does have numerous unique traits that it not once felt like a generic horror story. I was surprised that for as many cliches as it did have, like cheap jump scares and dread of the unexplained, it never felt predictable. While it's not even close to being an all-time horror classic in my eyes, I do understand its impact on the terror genre and can see why it's well regarded. I cherish it as a technical masterpiece since it gave us beautiful horror art. 1979's Phantasm is flawed for me, yet it contains so much terror that will always haunt you, like the endless dread of death itself.
I've been waiting for you, boy.
And the best of the franchise and my personal favorite is Phantasm 2. Oh yeah, I said it. The first sequel to the iconic classic is easily the elite master of the dark.
The ball is back. Phantasm 2.
For the first time in my rankings, a sequel claims the gold. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I love this movie much more than the original. Phantasm 2 is what Aliens was for Alien, what Friday the 13th Part 2 was for Jason, what T2 was for the Terminator. It was that outstanding. Phantasm 2 is the actionized follow-up for the more subtle, slow-paced thriller of Chapter 1, ramping up all stakes, bringing the villain to full light, and being the most epic face-off of the series between our horrifying eldritch abomination of a baddie and our naive underdog heroes. Picking right up after the first movie, Mike has been released from the nut house after barely surviving the twist ending of Scrim's Grim, where he reunites with a reluctant Reggie to gear up and stomp the shit out of that old coot for good, which you can probably guess how well it goes. This sequel is honestly what I was hoping for when watching the original, just this outrageously fantastic quest into forces beyond our comprehension, with lovable characters growing braver in the face of death, a madman preparing to unleash hell, and a pure mix of 80s horror and kick-ass awesomeness. Hell, even the comedy is stronger in this above all others. Now, some rank this lower on their lists, and even critics detest elements of it over the first, but I'm more forgiving of it since I had a blast watching it. This is the only movie which doesn't have Mike's OG actor in it, yet I really liked James LaGrosse as Mike, as he truly captures the character and feels like a more grown-up version of him. This movie also began the trend of introducing new characters to the war, where we meet unique newbies such as the tall man's equally eerie minions, Discount Hunk, innocent civilians who get roped into this rodeo, a reluctant priest forced to obey the tall one or die, a hot chick for ol' Reggie, and Liz Reynolds, a psychically connected girl who partners up with Mike as she believes him about the tall man's evil once weird occurrences take place in her hometown. I have no clue why folks complained about how it felt like it recycled too much of the original, as while the conflict's similar, there's a bunch of new ideas and fresh scares, almost as grim as the first. There was apparently some studio interference with this movie since Universal sought to market the movie for mass audiences, so Don had to adhere to exec notes and simplify the plot so it'd be easier to follow. No dream fake-outs and WTF moments like episode 1. Won't lie, I actually side with the studio for once because it actually made the movie far easier to swallow than the rest of this whole saga.
Damn, I'm good!
I know fans adore the vague mystery, but I'd argue this movie never once takes away anything which made this saga so phenomenal. In fact, this title is peak horror fantasy. Reggie, while not the star yet, becomes a bossa nova warrior covering Mike's arse in this flick, and he shows off a wide array of weapons and bro moments that solidified this guy as a true icon of horror heroes, especially with his baby, the four-barreled shotgun. One of the best parts of these movies, but strongly here, is that you genuinely care about the characters and cheer them on when they survive any obstacle. I actually felt horrified when somebody died here, and finally rooted for Mike and Reggie as badasses over the doofy mystery gang barely conquering the nightmare out of dumb luck. This film is just so fun, and the characters get a lot of epic moments to dazzle. But naturally, this is another grave robbery of talent as Angus Scrimm's tall man steals every scene he's in, and is solidified as the unrelenting death lord that he is. While I agree that he's far creepier in Chapter 1, I think the sequel grants Scrimm some of his most quotable lines.
You think that when you die, you go to heaven. You come to us.
While not as iconic as Part 1 style, there are a ton of gnarly visuals here too. This film confirms the true horror, that the tall man is winning. He's slaughtering countless towns in his demented quest, making the gothic atmosphere considerably unnerving. Yet much to my shock, this is when some badass action was injected into the series, and it's totally wicked. I love how the heroes are fighting back in this, as it does seem like they learn from their experience and proves to be a pumped up sequel, where the message of facing your fears is more clear here than Part 1. Everything that was great in the 70s movie is upgraded to fantastic levels in this. The story arc's more dynamic, dynamic, the scares are bizarre, the fantasy is magical, the heroes are more active, the villains are more savage, the violence is brutal, the dark mood is haunting, the imagery is unlike anything you've ever seen, and best of all, it made Phantasm so much cooler, by building off of the original and into a more intense thrill ride. There's no mind screw twist from me, this is without question the best Phantasm.
It's only a dream.
It's a dream. No, it's not.
And that concludes my Phantasm ranking. Now to turn around totally not expecting a twist ending whatsoever. See? Don't.